Welcome to Connecting with Carmel Special Edition. This is our opportunity to bring you some interesting news and information about the Keystone Project. Hi, my name is Jeff Worrell. It's come to our attention that a lot of people have received information that's been in the newspapers lately that may not be exactly accurate, or you've heard things from your neighbors or friends and associates that you wonder, are you really getting the whole truth? That's why we've taken this opportunity to ask Mike McBride, our city engineer for the city of Carmel, to join us today, and hopefully I'm going to ask questions that you may very well be thinking about, and then I'm going to ask Mike McBride to give us the actual facts and not rely on what we read in the newspaper. Mike McBride, welcome to Connecting with Carmel Special Edition.
Thank you, Jeff.
And, of course, we're on the show together every month where we talk about road construction, so this is not new. We've tried to bring information to the public, tried to get it out there, but this is going to be a special effort to address some specific questions.
That's right. So our goal was to try to make a much larger safety improvement than what the state had planned.
Okay. So in summary, maybe we can say we need to all remember back to as far back as 2003, and that the state's goals for US 31 were not really lining up with the, let's say, public officials' goals for Keystone.
That's exactly right.
Because of what the state was going to do with US 31.
Exactly.
Those are in conflict. You, the mayor, city officials, whoever that was, took steps to correct that,
yes,
to make it better for citizens.
That's correct.
Okay. Maybe that's a slide. You know, remember this. That's fact number one.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got control of 431 of Keystone. So for fact number two, let's forget about what's been talked about before, shared before. Your professional estimate is maybe best case or worst case scenario 15?
Yeah.
15 is conservative?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that takes care of Keystone and why there was this motivation to get control of the road. Because I hear that a lot out there. You know, why do we want it? We've got increased maintenance, increased all these other problems. Why do we want that headache?
Right.
It sounds to me like it was to protect property, create a safety, better safety, and also help east-west connectivity.
That's right.
You got it right?
Yep.
All right. So now you have control of the road. Now what happens?
Well, as soon as we have the relinquishment agreement signed, that happened in October of 2007, we began to design the planned improvements that Carmel had proposed, which was to separate those grades now rather than wait and see what happens and try to do it later like the state probably would have had to do.
Now, let me just, I think probably I jumped ahead a little bit because you have control, but in order to get control, you had, the mayor in his negotiations had to know what do I want in exchange for getting control? Right. And thus comes, you know, hopefully fact number three here as to what really happened with this $90 million.
Sure. Well, really, if you kind of start from that 2003 time frame and you start moving through time, the negotiations were active from 03 to 2007, the date that I just mentioned, when the relinquishment study or the relinquishment agreement was finally signed with the state. In that time frame, there's constant discussion between the city and the state on just exactly how we can make this relinquishment happen. City can get what it wants and the state can get what it wants. Well, there's a responsibility that falls on the state, as you alluded to, or would be transferred from the state to the city with the relinquishment. We needed to have an idea of what the dollar responsibility was tied to that relinquishment. Obviously, we've got more maintenance costs. We've got an immediate improvement cost that we've got to realize because there's obviously an improvement that's needed immediately. Well, we put together what we called our relinquishment study. We tried to put costs to what it would take to improve each one of those interchanges, including 96th Street and the 6 that are north of there that are currently planned. We also factored into that relinquishment study what it would take to maintain that roadway for about a period of 20 years. So just to pull together a number of what's our expenditure in a 20-year span. Well, that document produced a number of about $160 million. That study was furnished to the state, and it was really the basis for our negotiating. We had to have a number that we felt was reasonable for the state to hand over to the city as they handed over control of the roadway.
Now, did this study show the Carmel way of improving the road or the state way of improving the road?
It did. It included a conceptualization of what Carmel planned for the roadway.
Like behind us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you have at 160. How do we get to 90?
Okay. To put it very, very briefly, 90 was simply all we could negotiate out of the state.
Okay. At some point in any negotiation, you get to the bottom.
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. So at some point, were you involved in those negotiations?
I was only involved in the background.
Providing information,
That's
support
right.
to the mayor, that
The
kind
mayor
of thing.
really took
Okay.
the lead.
So you can't really speak to what those negotiations were about. But so we end up with 90 million.
That's right.
So, and are you bothered by maintenance costs?
No.
Why not?
The city maintains over 400 miles of roadway. This adds, 4.5 miles of a 4-lane facility. It's not a significant increase. Now, the engineering department doesn't maintain the roads, but the street department feels the same way. They're the ones who maintain these roads. It's not a significant increase on their current labor forces or on their budgets.
And maintenance means what? Snow plowing?
Snow removal, pothole patching,
Okay.
Basically, the mayor engineers tend to be a little on the conservative side.
Yes, that's your nature.
That's right.
I know that.
In any project, we don't intend to be the low bidder. We intend to be as realistic as possible, but we want to define the cost to a degree that it's covered. The mayor has experienced that with engineers, and
Experienced that within Carmel engineers?
That's right. That's right.
Tell me about that.
We, as an engineer, we're not developing that estimate in the competitive bid scenario, so it's hard for us to predict how hungry contractors are going to be, essentially.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon for us to see a 10% difference in between the engineer's estimate and the contractor's, the low bidder's estimate, them being 10% under what we estimated.
And have you experienced that
We
in
have.
reality?
We have.
Okay, well, can you give me an example of a project where the numbers were less than what you figured?
Sure. The Grand Boulevard project, I think, is a good example. It just opened a couple weeks ago. And the engineer's estimate on that project was 22% higher than where our low bidder actually came in and was awarded. So,
Okay, now engineering estimate, that's what the 112 was.
well, I think that the mayor basically looked at what the history of our bids were.
Uh-huh.
And probably used examples like Grand Boulevard.
Sure.
And he said to himself, we've come in pretty consistently under where our engineer's estimate is. There's probably some value engineering that could be done in these designs. There's probably some ways that we could find to save money as we learn more about the project, we get more information. So I think that the mayor was very optimistic that we could get the project done for $90 million. I mean, if you look at the difference between 112 and 90, it sounds like a lot, $20 million, but it's well within a 20% range. So,
Do you know why the mayor wouldn't have requested an engineer's estimate?
well, we didn't have the data. We couldn't produce it. The reason that we couldn't...
Why not?
Yeah, the reason we couldn't give the engineer's estimate was there's a significant cost tied to obtaining all of that information to produce an engineer's estimate. Essentially, you've got to have a design.
Now, the next question is, how do we go from 112 down to 90? We've got that, but we go from 90 to 140.
Okay. We talked about in the relinquishment study the basis for that being 05 cost data. Well, we also talked about looking at the decade prior. 3.5% was pretty typical for annual inflation rates. We used 4.5%, thinking that that was conservative, to inflate those 05 costs up to 08 costs, which produced the $112 million number. Well, instead of those costs increasing at 3.5% like we'd seen in previous years, we saw inflation costs hitting 10, 11, and 12% across those years, 05 to 06, 06 to 07, 07 to 08. So by the time we got to the actual construction date in '08, we had already blown that $112 million out of the water, essentially. If you backed that $112 million up to '05 costs, and then you inflated it at actual inflation rates, you end up at $140 million. If these projects are delayed to the point that we are not complete with the Keystone improvements by the time US 31 starts in Clay Township, we'll see what we're estimating to be about 25% of the US 31 traffic migrating over to Keystone. It was a requirement of our agreement with the state that we allow traffic to migrate over, including truck traffic. 25% over on US 31 is about 30% increase of traffic on Keystone. So if we have any of those signals still remaining on Keystone when US 31 goes under construction, we're going to see some significant issues.
Can you do it cheaper? Can you leave off the urns and the fountains and the extra plantings?
Sure.
Why do you need those extra things in this Keystone project?
Sure. Well, I would like to point out, I guess, first of all, the landscaping component, the urns and the
That's
trees
$4
and all those
million.
things. Yeah, those things have not been included in the construction packages so far. And by commitment from the mayor, they will not be included in the project until such time as we can find alternate funding.
Okay, so now I'm not sure I understand
Okay.
that. What does that mean exactly? There's $4 million in a budget somewhere, correct?
That's right.
For landscaping.
The $140 million number includes $4 million for landscaping.
And your commitment from the mayor is what about that landscaping?
It will not be included in this construction package. So as we're building these interchanges, we're building the elements that are critical to getting those things open to traffic. Trees and urns are not critical to opening to traffic.
Okay.
NDOT makes it's a practice now for them, and really with all of the negotiation that goes on for them to get one of their projects from start to finish through local government areas, because all their roadways pass through different jurisdictions, they're spending on the regular 3 to 5% on those context-sensitive elements.
Why?
To make it fit in the environment. It's the same thing that Carmel's trying to do.
Is it to try and, you say make it fit in the environment.
Right.
What does that really mean? You're just trying to make this ugly road not look so ugly.
That's right.
And are people willing to pay for that?
Yes.
Should the people out there watching this be confident that everyone involved in this project knows what they're doing?
I think so.
Why?
Well, the city engineer's office, for instance, is a professional staff.
Okay, now how long have you been here?
I've been here for 8 years.
Okay.
I am a professional engineer. I'm licensed in transportation engineering. My project manager, Jeremy Cashman, is also a professional engineer and licensed in transportation engineering.
Okay.
We're also working with a host of engineers in our design consulting firm's office, American Structure Point. All of those folks, probably 100 folks in their office have been involved in one way, shape, or form. We've got licensed surveyors, probably more than a dozen licensed engineers working on the design of this thing. We've also brought in out-of-country design professionals from Great Britain who are more experienced in this teardrop roundabout type construction because, frankly, they don't exist anywhere else in the United States quite like this. So we went to the folks that have done it before, and we said, come and do what they termed a safety audit. They reviewed our design to try to determine what things needed to be tweaked. Are we heading in the right direction? And those folks approved it. They've made some comments, but basically they felt that our design was consistent with what they would normally look for in designs of Great Britain.
I've heard some criticism of American Structure Point. Mm-hmm. Fair or unfair?
Well, I think that it's unfair.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell me why, and then I've got a follow-up question to that.
Sure. I think that, a lot of folks just simply misunderstand, what that $112 million was. There's a misconception that we had engineered plans at that point in time that we developed that number. That's not the case. There's also a misconception that we've got construction cost overruns, that we don't have enough money to build the projects that we have under construction today. It's completely false. We have all the money for those projects, and in fact, we're under what the contractor bid it for. We've had some
by the 9%.
Well, and even more than that, we've had negative change orders that have actually reduced the construction cost. Additionally, there's been comments about, well, they've just blown the estimate altogether. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah, I mean, I hear these people stand up at the beginning of a city council meeting and say these people should all be fired. Yeah. You should be fired. Right. You know, this American Structure Point. 50%
increase, that's completely unacceptable. Well, we developed an estimate in 2005 numbers, speculating about a 4.5% inflation rate. Frankly, Jeff, if a consulting engineer came to me and proposed to me in their relinquishment study a 12% annual inflation rate on any construction estimate, I would have asked for another opinion. I would have gone and found another engineer.
Why? Just because it's too unbelievable?
Yes, it's completely unbelievable. Nobody would have speculated a 12% inflation rate.
So American Structure Point, have they done other work? Do you have a history with them?
We have a very long history with Structure Point. That's
successful?
The same firm, very successful. The same firm that designed Hazeldale Parkway and supervised the construction. Grand Boulevard, the project that we discussed
Over
earlier.
budget, under budget?
Under budget. Both of those projects came in under the engineer's estimate. Illinois Street, the construction between 116th Street all the way up to 136th, that was a American Structure Point design as well. Again, significantly under budget on that project. So
is the bottom line here this 12% inflation rate? Is that the why isn't that the headline on in the paper? I mean
it's been explained in many different ways, but the heart of the matter is 12% inflation versus 4% inflation is a big difference, especially when you compound that across 5 years, 6 years. It is the biggest single factor. We actually have to have the money in the bank to encumber the full amount for the construction, even though it'll be spent down over a period of 12 to 15 months maybe before the project's completely built out. We have to have it all right from day one before we sign that contract.
Yeah.
I think that also kind of debunks the myth that we can't complete the projects that are under construction, which is another thing that I think is a misconception people have. There's just a feeling that the city has overspent on the projects that are already under construction. That's just not true.
Okay.
We have those projects fully funded, and they're actually coming in under budget.
Really, my last question for you is, you are a licensed professional.
Yes.
Are you comfortable with what is going on out on Keystone and what is yet to happen out there? Do you stake your reputation, so to speak, on what is going on?
I do. Frankly, I have to. I would not allow, being the city engineer of the city of Carmel, I would not allow the city to move forward with a plan that I didn't feel was the safest, most efficient, and most cost-effective combination of improvements. This is the most even balance of those three primary factors. It's the design that minimizes the impact to the community the most. It's a design that accomplishes the safest intersection type that we know, which is the roundabout. It's also a design that's going to achieve the capacity that we need going in well into the future, and will keep us from having to suffer through this huge deluge of traffic when US 31 is under construction.
And is any money being wasted?
No, it's not being wasted. The money that's being spent on this project is being spent very wisely. It's being spent on improvements that are consistent with the way Carmel does its projects. And frankly, the way we do our projects is why the city is able to experience the quality of life, attract the businesses that we attract. We have to stay consistent with that mode of improvement.
Okay. All right. Okay, very good. If people want to get more information and video updates, I would encourage you to go to www.carmellink.org, which is where I think your department puts up updates, and that's anything you want to say about that website?
Just keep an eye on it. We will try to keep updates on that site regarding council actions. We are still moving through the approval processes and the discussion. Council's still evaluating our project. We're just hopeful that they'll be timely in their review of our project and that they come to the same conclusion that all of this host of engineers that have been working on this project for more than a year now have come to.
Okay. If I can tell you know what you're doing and you're confident that we're going in the right direction. And of course, I hope you have found this interview helpful as you try and figure out what's truth and what might be fiction or what might just be something that is being fabricated to maybe support one side of an argument or another. My name is Jeff Worrell, and I've enjoyed being able to bring you this interview with Mike McBride, our city engineer, and hope that you will continue to tune in to Channel 16 often in order to find out news and information and what's going on in your city, the city we all know and love, Carmel, Indiana.